Perfect. So our aim today is to offer you the antidote to online meetings, and we're going to be doing this in 3 ways. Firstly, for those of you who were lucky enough to be among the first to sign up, you should by now have some snacks on the go. I know I've got my beer, I've got my pork crackling and my crisps, so I've got a lovely little selection going on here. And if you weren't lucky, then I certainly hope you've got some prepared. Secondly, we've got a bit of a theme going on with this webinar where it's all around tea time light entertainment. So we've got a bit of fingers on buzzers action to keep everyone alert and encouraging you all to take part. So this is going to be done in the form of polls. Don't worry, they are anonymous, but what they will do is they'll appear in your chat window and there'll be a selection of radio buttons for you to next to your chosen answer. So you just need to click the right one. And throughout the presentation, we'll be showing you pictures of or giving you picture clues that relate to tea time TV quiz shows, as well as a couple of family viewing favourites. So every time you see one, make sure you write it down. To get you started, this is an image of a clue to an intellectual quiz show where the original host was famously referred to as Bambi in an episode of The Young Ones. It's also memorable for making it look like one team is sat above the other. And finally, we've got Simplify IT's very own Jordan Tooth keeping an eye on the scores on the doors. So every time we have a poll, he'll be telling us the results. And my name is Rebecca Robinson, and I'm going to be your host for today. Don't worry, I'm not related to Anne Robinson, but I am a bit of a tough cookie when I need to be. So just to make sure there's no messing around, remember this session is being recorded. And to start things off, let's go through some housekeeping. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. If you do want to ask a question, please do so using the chat box. We are going to separate the sections out, so there will be Q&As at the end of each of the expert sessions. So if you do want to ask something, please do put it in the box. We'd love to see you. So if you've got your cameras on, keep them on, unless you've got some really awful wallpaper that no one wants to see. That's kind of the reason I've got mine off, but we shall see. And if you do live somewhere that's quite loud or noisy, please do pop yourself on mute. We'd also encourage you to send us your reactions, and you can do this by pressing the reactions button, which is on the chat, I believe. So give us a thumbs up, don't be shy, let us know that you're on and you're watching and you're listening. Now that's done with, let's see if you've really got your fingers on the buzzers. So we're just going to start off with one of our first polls. So just a little bit on the theme that we've got going on the webinar. Who in the audience has ever applied to be on or been on a game show? Maybe one like the image in this picture, another clue there for you. The poll should now have appeared in your chat window, and you can see the radio buttons next to click next to each answer that you want to give. So how many of you have A, been on a game show, B, applied to be on a game show, or C, watched a few in your time? And we'll just give it a couple of minutes, see what scores come in. So Jordan, when you're ready, how are we looking for the scores on the doors?
So the votes have just finished. We've had no one that's been on a game show, 2 people that have applied to be on a game show, and 11 that have watched a few in their time.
Oh, interesting. Be interesting to know what game shows they've applied to go on. Fantastic. Well, with so many game shows on here, you're well equipped for this webinar. To stop you all from playing buzzword bingo, you've got a little task as you go along, which is to make a note of the name of every game show you see. So we've already had 3. I hope you've been paying attention. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's expert. So we're delighted to have with us today VMware's HCI hero, Paul Hargreaves. And then we're going to be hearing from Tom Robinson, Simplify IT's superstar sales manager, also not related to Anne Robinson and also not related to me. There's a lot of Robinsons on here today. And finally, AC Gill, our tremendous technical expert. So before I officially introduce our first expert contestant, here's another quick poll for you. The picture in the background, this isn't actually a game show, but it does reference a very famous martial arts based family favourite, where a cloud helped a hero to get around. So I hope that gives you a bit of a clue. But going back to the poll, we've devised this as we know that cloud means different things to different companies. But one thing that is generally accepted is that we're all somewhere on the journey to its adoption, or are we? So let's see what you think. Go to your chat window and place your votes now by clicking the relevant radio button. So are you A, cloud first, B, cloud where appropriate, C, we're thinking about it, or D, what's cloud? We'll just give you a few more seconds to think about that. So Jordan, when you see all the votes come in, let us know what the scores on the doors are, please. Feels like some people are having to think about this one.
They're still totting up, Rebecca.
Perfect. Probably not as easy as, have you been on a game show? What do you know about cloud? Two very, very different things.
So we've got 9% that are cloud first, 63% that are cloud where appropriate, 27% are thinking about it, and great news is no one doesn't know what cloud is.
Ah, fantastic. So see, we've got some mixed results there. So that should mean we've got something for everyone today. It seems like it's a bit of a mixed bag. And now it's time to introduce our first expert. So Paul, please introduce yourself and your specialist subject.
Hi, my name's Paul Hargreaves. I'm delighted to be here in the hot seat and in the spotlight. Just a little bit about me. I'm the lead solutions engineer for hybrid cloud and software-defined data center at VMware UK. I've worked in the IT storage arena for a little over 2 decades now, so I'm hoping that's earned me enough stripes to call it my specialist subject. I guess we'll all know in a quarter of an hour or so. I really enjoyed the new announcements at VMworld, and I've spent 3 days and several sessions distilling the best content for you. If you think of any questions as we go along, pop them in the chat box. Other participants will see your questions, but of course, we do have some that we collected before the event when we called to confirm everything was okay and that you were coming. Since you're here, that's obviously worked okay too. Our resident moderator, Jordan, will be monitoring the questions as they come in. Rebecca and I will discuss them at the end. I'm going to cover 4 key VMware capabilities today: HCI Mesh, the data persistence platform, cloud disaster recovery, and VMware Tanzu. And if you don't know what all or some of these things are, that's fine. I'll be providing an intro to each. So let's get started with HCI Mesh. So if you wouldn't mind moving the slide on for me. Thank you. So one of the first big announcements at VMworld was the introduction of HCI Mesh, which is now on general release. Before I get into what it is and how it works, perhaps I'll spend just a couple of minutes talking about some of the infrastructure challenges it aims to address. The architecture of vSAN enables powerful non-disruptive growth through scale up and scale out. So without disruption to your existing setup, you can expand capability, performance, and capacity by adding hosts into a cluster, which is scale out, or simply grow capacity by adding disks to hosts, which is scale up. And as applications grow over time, this enables you to right-size both your performance and capacity as you expand. So that's great for most people. So that's all very straightforward. But some inorganic events can prove challenging to any architecture. Examples include when large application refactoring is occurring that requires significant storage to be added for things like logs, or when a new line of business for analytics comes along which wants to consume a lot of compute, or a company merger or acquisition, which may result in business units asking for lots of unforeseen storage requirements to a cluster. Now, historically, when those peaks have occurred, it causes the existing clusters to run out of either storage or compute, and potentially strands whatever was the lower demanded resource. So while vMotion enables you to do integrations between clusters, and that's part of that shared nothing infrastructure that VMware's always had, this still forces you to move things together between the clusters. Now, traditional storage has had methods of solving these challenges, but the results weren't particularly exciting. They were often underwhelming. So for example, array virtualization solved the problem by proxying storage through one array to another, and this allowed for consolidation of stranded storage resources. But this results in added latency, some complexity, additional costs, and administrators are forced to use multiple user interfaces and tools for basic operations. And of course, this all makes it harder to troubleshoot. I don't know about you, I've been in IT a long time, and anything that makes life harder is not something I want. So for these reasons, VMware took a totally different approach. So you can move on to the next slide for me. These challenges, we introduced something called VMware HCI Mesh. Someone needs to go on mute. Thank you. HCI Mesh is a unique software-based approach for disaggregation of compute and storage resources. And it brings together multiple independent vSAN clusters for a native cross-cluster architecture. So this disaggregates the resources and enables you to utilize that stranded capacity. So simply, this allows one or more vSAN clusters to remotely mount data stores from another vSAN cluster, and these of course are just servers, within your vCenter inventory. This approach maintains the essence and simplicity of HCI by not fundamentally changing the existing HCI model or requiring any specialized hardware. So now a cluster with excess compute can mount excess storage on a remote vSAN cluster. The setup is really easy, and we've got built-in health checks to verify that the configuration is both healthy and supported. Next slide, please. So at VMware, we also discussed how we are taking our commitment to supporting modern apps on Kubernetes to the next level by introducing what we're calling the vSAN Data Persistence Platform, as well as partnerships with some of the top companies in the area of object storage and modern databases. Modern apps depend on modern stateful services, such as object storage, NoSQL databases, and event streaming services for their persistent needs. Now, over the past few years, we've been seeing an increased amount of interest from customers to run these services on vSAN. However, modern stateful services present unique requirements on IT infrastructure, and here are three. So the first requirement is to have a fast response time to developer needs. IT admins should be able to quickly respond to developer needs and deploy services easily. Developers should be easily able to dynamically scale as the applications scale. The next consideration is service-coordinated IT operations, and there's a mouthful. IT admins should have visibility into how infrastructure operations impact the availability of these stateful services. So an example of this would be understanding the impact that putting machines into maintenance has to do software upgrades. What does that have to all of these stateful services that you're running for the developers? What impact would it have to the developers? Do you have to go talk to them? That sort of thing. And last but not least, support for shared nothing architecture. So almost all of these modern services were designed around share nothing architecture and have data services such as replication and encryption natively built in. Now, deploying those modern distributed systems requires rethinking the assumptions that we made in the storage world about what features and capabilities should be provided by the infrastructure. There's no point in having the storage do the replication if the application's already doing it, for example. So the vSAN Data Persistence Platform is going to transform how modern stateful services will be deployed and managed in the private cloud by making it really easy to deploy these services with pre-configured best practices and all the networking and security services offered by VMware Cloud Foundation, with the result that you can get running these with lower TCO and simplified operations and management, but more importantly, the developers get a seamless service provided by IT. Next slide, please. We're also very excited to announce VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. This is a new VMware on-demand disaster recovery offering that's delivering a software as a service with the benefit of cloud economics. This offering is based on technology from VMware's recent acquisition of Datrium. Now, although organizations realize the importance of implementing a robust DR solution for business continuity, complexities such as compliance with regulations, ransomware, and security breaches mean that traditional DR solutions can be complex, expensive, and unreliable. And I find when I'm talking to customers is that this leaves many IT teams feeling less confident that their DR plans work when needed. or that they'll never test them until, of course, the inevitable happens. And this is why many customers are turning to disaster recovery as a service, because of its simplified operations and lower total cost of ownership. In other words, many are seeing DR as the ultimate rentable IT service. And this is exactly why DR as a service adoption is on the rise. Now, as Datrium had a long list of impressive customers across banking, education, healthcare, and engineering, you can be assured that this is a tried, tested, and trusted option for your business. And of course, it's backed now by VMware, and we've been doing IT for a long time. As an easy-to-use cloud-based solution, it combines efficient cloud storage with simple SaaS-based management for IT resiliency at scale. IT benefits from consistent familiar VMware operations across production DR, a pay-when-you-need-it failover capacity model, and instant power-on capabilities for fast recovery. Let's dig in a little more by starting off with the on-demand capability. A powerful aspect of the VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery is its ability to power on VMs without waiting to fully rehydrate data from cloud storage into the VMware Cloud on AWS offering. This is via a live mount of NFS volumes from the DR copy of the data to the ESX hosts that are running inside AWS. Now, for even faster recovery, there's a pilot light option, which pre-provisions and pre-configures a small initial footprint of hosts. Also, throughout the entire life cycle, VMs stay in the native vSphere VM format. So this eliminates the need for brittle or time-consuming disk format conversions, especially at a time when a disaster is occurring. That's the worst time to be doing any sort of conversions. So we've completely eliminated the need for that. The instant power on capability for VMs is an important use case when you're doing things like testing lots of instances of virtual machines to figure out the right recovery points during, say, a ransom attack. So again, this capability is there and very easy to use. So let's talk a little bit about that ease of use. So with the VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery solution, you can manage both the Cloud DR and your production sites with vCenter, and you retain access to all the familiar VMware constructs, such as clusters, data stores, virtual switches, following a failover. So you don't need to retrain yourself or spend a lot of time learning a different environment. The management console simplifies DR maintenance operations, eliminates the burden of lifecycle management of the DR software, and has sufficient scale both for large but also small environments. There's DR health checks that are occurring about every 30 minutes, giving you more confidence that the DR plan will work when it's needed. And finally, there's automated reports that are audit ready, helping you to meet your internal company policies or regulatory compliance requirements to prove that you not only have disaster recovery plans in place, but they are actionable and ready to go. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. So last but not least, the fourth topic related to my specialist subject, vSphere with Tanzu. Now, microservices, containers, and Kubernetes help to free applications from infrastructure, enabling them to work independently and run anywhere at any scale. With VMware Tanzu, you can make the most of these cloud-native patterns, automate the delivery of containerized workloads, and proactively manage apps in production. Tanzu is all about freeing developers to do their thing, which is hopefully building at least passable, but usually great applications for the business. Now, customers told us that they didn't want to wait until they'd adopted VMware Cloud Foundation, which has had Tanzu now for several months, which is why, as part of releasing vSphere 7 Update 1, which we released about October the 6th, we announced vSphere with Tanzu. Now, vSphere with Tanzu is a developer-ready infrastructure that delivers three key capabilities. First, it's the fastest way to get started with Kubernetes. You can get a Kubernetes environment up and running within about an hour by configuring enterprise Kubernetes infrastructure alongside your existing network and storage. So you don't need to deploy an entire large environment from scratch. We make it very easy to get in and start using these capabilities. Next, You can offer a seamless developer experience, as IT admins are able to provide development teams with self-service access to the Kubernetes namespaces and clusters, which allows the developers to integrate Tanzu into their development processes and their CI/CD pipelines. So they don't need to come to you and say, can you provision me X amount of VMs? Can you provision me X amount of XYZ? You just set up the policies and the namespaces for them to use, and then you leave them to use the infrastructure as needed. And they could just use that within whatever policy space you set. And then third, the solution enables Kubernetes to be delivered to the fingertips of millions of you as IT administrators. So Kubernetes can be managed through the familiar environment that you're used to, which is vSphere and vCenter. This enables you to use your existing tooling and skill sets to manage Kubernetes and the applications that are deployed inside Kubernetes. And even better than that, it provides you the ability to easily grow your skill sets in and around the Kubernetes ecosystem without having to sit there and build Kubernetes from scratch, because that's not exciting. 20 years ago, when I first got into IT, building stuff from scratch was exciting. I'm a little older and crankier now. There's nothing more boring than reading 20 pages of text or 200 pages of documentation for just to get a basic service running or not. So I hope that's given you a taste of what's new and improved from VMware. And that's been a lot of talking from me, so I'll take a few sips and a quick breather while I hand back to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Some great content there, but I wouldn't just sit back just yet, because that's clearly prompted some questions from people. So please use your chat facility now to send any queries in that you've got. We have got some questions that were sent before the session, so I'm going to break these down by topic for you, Paul. So on HCI Mesh, the question that's been asked, is HCI Mesh for everyone?
Well, I haven't yet sold it to my mother, but I am trying really hard. No, so more seriously, if you've only got 3 or 4 hosts, then probably it's not going to be that useful to you, because you can probably squeeze enough storage and compute into that configuration. As soon as you go over 2 or 3 clusters, at that point, this becomes quite interesting technology, because at that point, you're likely to start to have that imbalance that this will help you easily deal with.
Perfect. And what does it enable that I don't have today?
So it is that sharing of capabilities between clusters. So instead of having independent clusters that are not sharing anything between them, which means you have to vMotion those workloads around, this way you can go, I'm just going to borrow a little bit of storage from cluster A to cluster B, or I'm going to put these VMs that are physically stored in cluster A, but I'm going to run them over in cluster B. So it sort of makes it easy to move things around without actually needing to physically move them around.
Perfect. Anything that's easier in my book is always better. And in relation to the persistence platform, the first question we have is, why is persistence so important?
Well, I guess when developers are starting to write their applications, they don't know, I found generally when I talk to developers, they don't know IT particularly well. So they'll know their area of expertise, which is how code works and how to make that work, but they won't understand things like how backup recovery works or how disaster recovery for their applications work, and they don't care, because they're just writing the application. That's what's important to them. So the idea behind this persistence platform is it deploys itself with all of the best practices that are set up in a secure way, but then also enables you to very quickly layer on those sort of enterprise capabilities that developers don't understand or care about, so that you do get things like disaster recovery, and you do get things like backups occurring without having to go and train the developers about how to do this. And as an example, I've spoken to more than one customer whose developers developed something, it went into production, it then broke at some point because the IT equipment broke, because that's life, and then they then go to IT and say, can you recover it? And of course IT goes, what application? Never heard of it before. Oh, it's on that machine over there that's broken. Yeah, it sucks to be you. So yes, this can make a big difference.
Fantastic. And the big question, is it on general release?
So we've released the vSphere pieces, so we're ready from the VMware side of things. We're now having our partners do their final qualifications and bring their products to market, because this is a joint thing between ourselves and our partners. So it's very, very soon now for it to be available for you to consume.
Perfect. And moving on to VMware Cloud VR, are there any customers already using it?
Absolutely. Yes. So as we bought Datrium, we've continued the service that Datrium were offering, and we're now starting to expand it out to cover more of the VMware estates that we obviously understand much better than they did.
Fantastic. And could you explain how they're using it and how we can find out more, please?
Sure. So if you go to cloud.vmware.com, we've got details there about what the service is, but also talk to your partner. Talk to Simplify IT, because that's, you know, their expertise is understanding all the new things that vendors like ourselves are putting out into the market and making sure that you're able to understand them and consume them if it's the right thing for your business.
Fantastic. And your final piece on Tanzu and vSphere for Kubernetes was really interesting. Who's it best suited to?
I'm going to say it's for everybody, of course. Now, the reality is not everybody has teams of developers running around every second of the day at the moment, but we're seeing more and more customers are starting to look at it and understand it. So deploying it for a small subset of your environment while you play and get used to the technology is definitely available now, so that you can start to get yourself familiar when the flood does come.
Excellent. And we've also had someone ask, isn't it just for companies that are developing code?
It's unusual. I guess this might sound strange, but it's unusual. I come across anybody who doesn't have coders in their environment, even though they might not realize it, because you'll still have Excel jockeys writing random stuff, or people writing little databases and sharing it out internally. But a different way of thinking about it, rather than just, I don't have a team of 50 Kubernetes developers and I'm never going to employ them because there's only 20 of us in the organization, is that if you're still running on-premise IT infrastructure, you're probably going to go off and deploy some of these applications that are going to be provided to you by some customers, some of your partners who are using these technologies. Run them somewhere. Again, having the infrastructure available to you is the right thing to do. Rather than going, oh, now I've got my first application, I need to figure out how to stand it up, and I've got no expertise at all. And just before you move on, there was one question on chat about the difference between VMware Disaster Recovery via VMC on AWS using the native replication capabilities that are built into vSphere. And the answer to that is, if you're already using VMC on AWS, then you've already paid for what we would consider to be the Premier service. So you've already got a bunch of machines running in AWS that are replicating all the time. In that case, you've got hot standby and you're ready to go. Now that's fantastic, but it's a Premier offering. And we find that some customers want something where it's okay if disaster recovery takes an hour rather than it needing to be hot and online all the time. So basically, it's I wouldn't say a lower tier, but it's a slightly lower cost solution for DR when you don't want to have the full hot, everything is ready to go at the push of a button. You want it to go at the push of a button and a little bit of time.
Okay, fantastic, Paul. Thanks for that. Is there any other questions on the Q&A, or is that all of them?
That's all of them at the moment. If any pop up, I'll continue to chat on chat. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. So if we were in person at a conference, I guess we all remember those days, we'd have the chance to have a little break now and maybe a biscuit with a cup of tea to transition us between speakers. So let's see whether you know your hobnobs from your Jaffa cake. Personally, I know this selection in itself is controversial, as there's at least one person on the call who favours a bourbon above all others. But let's see what the nation's favourite is. Click the relevant radio button for your answer. So, is it chocolate fingers, B, chocolate digestives, or C, chocolate hobnobs? Just give it a few seconds, and then when you're ready, Jordan, if you'd like to let us know what the scores are on the doors, and then I'll reveal the answer.
So I think the scores are in. We've got 8% who like a chocolate finger, 25% like a chocolate digestive, and a whopping 66% favour a chocolate hobnob.
Oh wow! So some oat lovers out there with the chocolate hobnobs. Well, I can reveal our survey said it's chocolate digestives. According to the study, 69% preferred a chocolate digestive, closely followed by 61% stating that their shortbread was their favourite biscuit. Kind of thought that was just for Christmas, but apparently all year round. So guys, hand out to you. What's your favourite?
I'm going to say bourbon.
Bourbon. Interesting.
And for the purpose of the survey, I went for a hobnob, but in reality, it's probably a custard cream.
Oh, two classics there. Good for dunking, as long as they don't fall to bits in your tea, which does happen quite a lot to me.
Custard creams are just too sweet, man. It's got to be a chocolate hobnob all the way.
You're a hobnob, are you, AC? You like a chocolate hobnob?
Got a bit of grease in them, bit greasy, bit nice.
Greasy.
and do you dunk, AC? That's a big question we have to ask.
Yeah, I do.
Excellent. Yes, good. Right, now we've got that sorted. It's time to move on. So let's all give a warm welcome to Tom Robinson, who's going to bring HCI to life for us with some fantastic customer stories. And how about this for an introductory slide? And if anyone doesn't get this, you're going to be kicking yourselves afterwards. So whilst we're all enjoying a tea time session, I'm going to hand over to Tom, and he's going to talk to you about some customer experience.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Before I start, I'll just take a swig of my beer just to calm the nerves. So before I introduce some of our customer stories, I thought I'd take the opportunity just to introduce Simplify IT and our story, really. Some of you guys who have joined today work with us closely already, but some of you don't. But essentially, after working for EMC and NetApp, our founder Lee Rogers realised that there was a gap in the market for a partner that could not only deliver sophisticated data centre and cloud solutions, but also the technical capability to install it. So in 2012, Simplify IT was formed. As a collective, we've got decades of IT experience in our technical team and sales teams. So we deliver services to our customers all over the globe, and we continue to grow year on year. Fortunately, even in tough years like we're currently experiencing. And we truly believe that our value comes from helping customers, you guys, through the entire solution acquisition process. We provide a huge range of IT solutions and professional services, and our reputation is everything to us, really. So ensuring that we get the right solution that actually fits your needs for the right price, it's really important to us. And this is why our customers recommend us time and time again. We also work very closely with vendor partners such as VMware, and we keep our accreditations year after year and continue to expand that offering. For example, we bought on VMC on AWS as an offering and have all the accreditations for that. And more recently, we've actually become a VMware managed service provider, which allows us to provide a slightly different offering to customers as and when they need it, really. We don't just work with major enterprises, we champion businesses of all sizes, and our commitment from the beginning was and still is to be one of the best IT resellers and service providers in the UK. And we pride ourselves on our high levels of excellence, technical consistency and customer service. So I'm proud to really be able to share a couple of customer stories with you today, and hopefully have some questions at the end. Thank you very much. Right, so first story. First customer story is a well-known heating supplies manufacturer. Which is quite topical considering we're moving into winter, so keeping our homes warm is important to all of us. And as you know, the population's growing. I'm not sure what it's like in your areas, but certainly where I live, it seems to be housing development after housing development. So this particular company's enjoyed growing turnover and profits over recent years, but also as an ethical business, it also measures its success by ensuring workplace safety and focusing on reducing their environmental footprint. With this in mind, they engaged with Simplify IT just to look for an IT infrastructure that would enable them to grow whilst remaining agile. And really a focus was keeping a minimal data center footprint, but ensuring they could tie in their remote sites and provide an automated DR functionality. So that's kind of where we introduced the likes of vSAN HCI. Its particular use case at remote sites and the manageability through vCenter really fit the bill in this particular instance. This year's requires exceptional levels of business agility for many of us. I'm sure many of you on the call are in the same boat. But for those providing critical infrastructure to care homes and hospitals, such as this customer was, the ability to pull out all the stops and up production line capability fast was quite literally life or death. In addition to that, the expanding production line capability, they also put a new product line into market to support the NHS, which involved programming an office-based 3D printer to work from home. Simplify and VMware's role in this has been to support the customer to design and implement the IT solution that underpins the business agility and also provide the ongoing support for this. Rather than focusing on time-consuming operational activities, the current environment frees the IT team at this particular business to really focus on the business critical activities. So yeah, really good to work with those guys. They've been a customer of ours for a number of years now, and yeah, it's good to see them grow and how they've adapted to the current environment. So on that note, I'll move on to number 2, please, Rebecca. Okay, so since about 2018, early 2018, we've worked with a large electronics manufacturer who operate sites in the UK, Europe, and Asia, and are actually the world's largest supplier of best-in-class equipment and technological process for the electronics industry, which, as you all can imagine, it's quite a high demanding feat. The company's focused on offering highly integrated hardware and software solutions on a global scale. So it's imperative, really, as a business, that the technology they use allows them to deliver the standards that they've set for themselves. In 2020 alone, they've expanded service operations in one continent and launched a new service in another. So extremely active and forward-thinking business. But typically, like many other manufacturers we work with, they've got a relatively small IT team that are required to have a large reach, which is always a challenge. This highlighted the need to work closely with partners in technology and to standardise on leading trusted technologies to create an environment that's easier to run from essentially 2 locations, mainly in the UK and Europe, which is where the bulk of the IT teams are based. They'd already made quite a significant investment with VMware, with an extensive VMware vSphere environment. So that, combined with the support from Simplify IT, this particular customer's implemented vSAN at some of their more remote locations, some of which are way out in Asia, and it's allowed the core IT team to rapidly expand, adapt, and manage those individual site needs through the vCenter management plane. Simplify IT and VMware, we're actually currently working with this customer on a proof of concept to demonstrate how VMC on AWS will provide automated disaster recovery, which is a key business driver at the moment, on a global scale, really, for key business applications. And this particular POC could also lay the foundations for a cloud-first strategy should the business want to go down that route as and when new business applications come on board. So yeah, that's about it, really, from my customer story. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take some. Yeah.
I think Rebecca's on mute.
I think she might be.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, I put myself on mute so that I could just stop the background noise because there's someone's just can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Sorry. Someone has decided to mow in their garden, so I put myself on mute so it would drown out the noise a bit. So apologies, everyone. But yeah, thanks for talking through those, Tom. That was great to see the solutions brought to life. Before you sit back, there are a few questions for you. So the first one that I've got is, as with any project, no doubt there will have been a few challenges along the way. What kind of challenges have been most common amongst customers recently, and how have you solved them?
Good question. Probably the most prominent challenge there's, we live in an information age. You can pretty much log on to Google, ask it any question you want, and you might get 1,000 different answers. And this is no different in terms of the technology that we're using. This isn't just people at home. And I think from a customer perspective, that can present quite a challenge, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot things or implement new projects. So I think how we solve this and how we work well with our customers is their ability to rely on our technical ability and knowledge to decipher through that information and provide the correct path to not only implement new projects but also troubleshoot current issues that they've got. An example of this would be we're working with a customer at the moment. They've acquired a smaller business. They're trying to integrate that business into their current network, but next week the challenge could be entirely different. So our ability to have multiple skill sets really helps them solve the problems that they come up with, to be honest.
Yeah, perfect. I do see that quite a lot with some opportunities where you do get that information overload, and like you say, you can Google anything these days, but it brings up multiple results for one issue. So fantastic. And obviously customers have a choice about whether to use VMware or other HCI technologies. Did any of the customers you mentioned go through an eval process? And if so, why did VMware come out on top?
Yeah, so typically on an engagement, that's how we like to work. We like to provide an evaluation process because there's not one route that fits all, to be honest. So what, and as a reseller, we work with what we believe to be best of breed solutions, but there can be multiple in a space. HCI, for example. So what we like to do is really work with the customer, understand what they're trying to achieve, what they've got in place already, and a solution that fits. Particularly in customer 2, in the story I've just discussed, we've gone through quite an extensive evaluation process and sort of ended up on the VMC route as a best fit to really meet the business needs in this case.
Perfect. And customers have a choice too for which IT service provider they use. So what is it that gave Simplify IT the edge in these circumstances, or indeed in general, what makes you guys stand out?
Similar kind of thing, I like to think. We have an idea of technology that we think is best, but we don't try and push someone down a path that they don't necessarily need to go down, or something that's not going to benefit them as a business. And I think credit to AC and the tech team, really, their ability and their knowledge and understanding is what sets us apart from our competitors, I think.
Fantastic. And finally, thinking about the future, it's great to see what you've achieved with your customers, but what do you think is next?
So 2 things really. So what's next from a Simplified personal perspective is we continually develop and train, and we like to skill up all the employees that work here. We think it's important. Technology is changing all the time, so our knowledge and training should never really stop. And that kind of links into how we work with the likes of VMware, really. That they brought out some really interesting things at VMworld. And it's our job to really get into the nuts and bolts of these things, and then be able to provide that knowledge to our customers who might not have the time to sit and read through documentation after documentation.
Perfect, fantastic. That's really, really good insight to your customers, and also a bit about Simplify as well. So thank you for that.
No worries.
Perfect. So when we were choosing this image, it did make us think about how game shows have changed, and I'm really hoping that you'll get this one as well. But now we've heard from Tom what is possible to achieve, it's time to get into the nuts and bolts with AC Gill, who is going to offer us a deep dive on the coolest innovations of VMware for data center and cloud. Just to go back to the picture as well, it's kind of like a say what you see picture. There's a bit of a visual clue there. So without further ado, over to you, AC.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I kind of wanted to talk about a story of an engagement that we had with one of our international organizations. At the time when we engaged with them, they were heavily invested in VMware, had a lot of traditional storage, not mentioning name of vendor, which was spread out throughout the globe. They had quite a complex environment, and as with kind of most DR processes, I've worked with a number of organizations to implement automation within the space of DR. It can get really complex and stressful under pressure to make sure you reach your RTO, your recovery time objective, essentially the amount of time that you've agreed with the business to get the system back online. So yeah, kind of when we met them, they were after a way to make those processes more slick. So they were relying on non-orchestrated DR processes. So you guys probably, I don't know whether you've gone through the pain of having to do a DR thing manually, but you've got kind of, you have to quest the data, you've got to make it writable at the disaster recovery site, you've got to mount it, you've got to attach the VMs, you've got to power them all on, you've got to wait for them to power on, wait for the services to start, the list just goes on and on and on and on. They can get really complex. If you are a PowerShell wizard or monkey, then you can get quite far with it. I've written some pretty scary PowerShell scripts to get quite far, but doesn't quite do everything you want it to do. Maybe I'm not so good with PowerShell. So we had a chat with this particular customer and discussed different options, what they could do. You know, they're on premise, whether it's hybrid, cloud, and they started engaging based on our recommendations with different major players in this space. And eventually, after some time, they narrowed the choices down to VMware Cloud and AWS. That was their preferred solution. But they still had and still have, you know, significant investment in on-premise infrastructure. So we went down kind of a dual pilot approach, which overlapped to some extent. So pilot number one was Site Recovery Manager, VMware Site Recovery Manager, between two different locations, one in the UK, one in Europe. And then the second pilot was taking those two locations again, looking at them again, and then replicating those locations back up into VMware Cloud and AWS, which gave them like a plethora of different options. They could really choose how and when they wanted to move and where they wanted to move their data. As some of you may know, I don't know whether you know SRM, so Site Recovery Manager is kind of, I think of it as an orchestration tool, really. It's a toolbox with some clever scripts and some clever APIs and clever bits and pieces, which automates all the things that you need to do manually through literally, I'm not lying to you, literally a click of a button. You tick a tick box to say, I really want to do it, and then you click the button and it does it. And what you're doing is when you design the solution, you're saying, I want to protect. You have like this concept called a protection site. So it's lots of VMs or whatever your resources are on your protection site, and you put them in a protection group, and then you fail them over to what's called a recovery site. And they run through a workbook, and all the kind of different steps that you do are done automatically. You can use native vSphere replication using vSphere replication appliances, or you can plug into, with the on-premise one, you can plug into traditional storage. There's loads of different vendors. There's things called storage replication adapters, which basically what they do is go and talk to the array and, you know, break the replication, make it writable and things like that. So in effect, what SRM does is it's an automation wrapper, you could say, that wraps around, removes human error, makes the thing a lot faster, like a lot faster. I've seen a reduction from like 2 days to about 2-3 hours. So it's a very good tool. So in terms of the AWS piece, what that basically is another, you just think of it simply as another site. The site just happens to be up in AWS, and it allows them to fail over resources, virtual machines, essentially from the protection site to the recovery site being up in AWS. But what that is in the background or behind the scenes is essentially it's a managed version. It's an AWS IaaS and VMware SaaS managed version of VMware Cloud Foundation, essentially, which is a fully fledged software-defined data center stack, which includes vSphere, includes vSAN, includes NSXT and vRealize, and a thing called an SDDC manager, which is like a funky-looking GUI. So essentially, what it's doing is creating a very smart, API-driven, cloud-based, scalable site in your business. You can use to run live workloads or disaster recovery workloads. It appears very simply just as a second data center. So if you remember your vSphere client, you've got data center objects, just appears as a second data center within your same on-premise vSphere client. You don't have to, you can connect to it directly, but you can just hybrid connect it. So you have two data centers. So yeah, you just use your HTML5 client and off you go. The whole thing, to be fair, I did it a few months ago. The whole thing can spin up in about 2 hours. And if you want to just play, I wouldn't recommend doing it on your own credit card like I did and getting charged $4,000. But you can spin it up for one node box. You can spin it up in a pilot, and it runs for 30 days and then deletes itself. If you decide to keep it, you can keep that rolling, and you can expand it out to up to 3 nodes or beyond. But yeah, essentially you can run a pilot box. This is what we did for this particular customer. So other things it can do is you can take your on-premise network, so your VLAN, your subnet, so whatever that is, let's say it's 192.168.0.1, whatever, /24. You can punch that up through a bridge network up into the VXLAN VNI, which is a VXLAN ID up in VMware Cloud, and you can have the cloud-based VMs layer 2 bridge back to the on-site infrastructure and go through your on-prem firewall. There are caveats around doing this, but it can totally be done. I've done it. What it means you can do is you can do this thing called cloud bursting. So you can take all your VMs and just punch them up into the cloud and they just continue working, but you've moved the compute and moved the storage. It's a very, very clever system. You don't have to re-IP the workloads, because let's be honest, re-IPing VMs, some VMs like it, a lot of VMs don't. And it depends how your application is configured. It requires a lot of testing. I generally find it's a bit of a pain in the ass and prefer not to. So the actual Cloud Foundation piece, because it's a managed service, within the Cloud Foundation, you've got this concept called a management domain, where the vCenters and the NSXT managers and the vSAN, all that kind of stuff is living in the management domain. And you've got vRealize in there as well. And then you've got a workload domain separately as that. And the workload domain is where your actual virtual machines run. But because it's a managed service, you're essentially not responsible for the underlying infrastructure. That's AWS's job. And you're not responsible for the management domain. So all the NSXT management configuration upgrades, all that kind of stuff, the vCenter upgrades, all that kind of stuff, you just abstract it from it. It's a managed service. It will be taken care of. You get given an SDDC management console where you can manage the day-to-day operations. Like you can configure firewall rules within NSXT, things like that. Spin up some VMs. So yeah, you're kind of abstracting a lot of the complexity, I guess, to the managed service. If you did buy that through us, through an MSP, and you became an MSP customer, then you pick up the phone to us first, and we deal with the support, so we can onboard you as a support customer. There are some savings as well doing that. So as it's in AWS, you've got access to native AWS features like VPCs and stuff. So if you had some workloads in AWS, through a common VPC, you can talk through in and out. So, you can get a VM in AWS and talk to a VM in VMware Cloud, so you can bridge the two. You can also set up some IPsec VPNs or have a direct connect. You can use BGP or static routing, whatever you want to do, to get the networks from the cloud into your on-premise infrastructure. The workload domain where your VMs run, it's blisteringly fast. It's basically on a pure 100% NVMe, vSAN cluster. It's ridiculously fast. You can have up to 10 clusters with 16 hosts in each. So it's, it'll scale beyond most people's needs. So the client that's done this has now, once we're in the middle of doing the pilot, as Tom said, will have the flexibility of shifting their workloads between UK, Europe, VMware Cloud back to UK. They can, they can send their workloads anywhere they like, depending on their needs. And now they've got a footprint, an investment in VMware Cloud. And, if the proof of concept goes well, then they've essentially got live functioning compute, storage, and security up in the cloud. So they can reduce their investment on premise, maybe massively simplify what's on premise and start moving to a cloud first model. We've done some TCO, total cost of ownership exercises, and it does, although the bill initially is expensive, if you actually do that across 5-year period with everything else that you need to do, it actually comes out cheaper often. So long run, these guys ain't going to be patching anything into ESX, and they ain't going to be patching servers. It's all going to be kind of managed up there in the cloud. So that's that slide. Can we get the next slide? That's the customer story.
It should have moved on by now.
Awesome. Oh yeah, I just didn't refresh it. So next slide, deep dive sizing vSAN. Yeah, so there's a couple of videos that were presented through VMworld, which one was this sizing vSAN. I think Jordan can post some links. If not, we can get them to you. I just, rather than, obviously I'm not going to play them right now, I'll just run through some highlights of those sessions. If you didn't get a chance to check it out, I'll just give you my summary and also just some input from me as a guy that does this stuff every day. So number one, VMware have partnered with a company or a solution which you've probably heard of called Live Optics. This is an industry standard benchmarking tool. The first thing that probably is already in your mind is, oh my God, what do we do with our data? Because the people that run this, I'm not going to tell you, you know who they are probably. The people that run this potentially could harvest data from it and then start cold calling you with very specific information because they've got your data. That's totally not the case. Your data is protected. The only people that can read the analytics are VMware partners and the customers themselves. So don't be concerned about that. To set it up, what we'd normally do is invite you as a customer as part of our partner account. So we kind of create a sub customer account, and then we guide you through downloading, configuring what's called a collector, which is a piece of software that will go and grab metrics from your system. The collectors support a massive amount of operating systems. I kind of got bored reading the list. It was that long. It's like all the major hypervisors, even all the weird quirky ones. Even supports loads of Linux, Red Hat Linux, all that kind of stuff. It even supports Unix stuff like Solaris, which I've never even seen in 20 years of my life. But anyway, it supports those. We recommend that you configure these collectors. We'll work with you, but recommend that you configure the collectors to get a decent sized baseline. A lot of people kind of just go, oh, I'll just do 24 hours or a couple of days or whatever. But in my experience, what can happen is you've got some unknown or partially known, maybe not by the guy that you're doing the sizing exercise with, event that happens on, let's say, like a Wednesday evening or a Wednesday daytime or lunchtime or something, and you run the capture Monday, Tuesday, and you miss this thing. So you've got this massive spike in activity that's not part of your baseline, which is going to completely throw out your sizing exercise for vSAN. So it's really important that you understand, well, we help you and you help us understand your business and what kind of baseline we need. A week is generally fine. That's generally what we'd go for. So once you've got your baseline and you've ran your collector across all your systems, what you'll see in the portal, I'd like to show it you, but just reach out to us and we can give you a demo. You see an aggregate of a lot of metrics. So it's a kind of a drillable dashboard. It's a very nice looking thing. You'll have things like latency, IOPS, throughput, all the common things. You'll also have compute and storage capacity. So you can accurately feed all this data straight into a vSAN sizing tool. So that's the really cool thing about this, is that the the tool has the ability to click a button at the top and suck it or punch it straight into vSAN Ready Node Sizer. Now that is fantastic. It just saves a lot of faffing around, importing RV tool things and you kind of repeating the things that you've already done essentially, and it removes all the human error. So essentially what will happen is that data that you've collected from the tool will go straight into vSAN Ready Node Sizer, which is awesome. So one of the reasons why that's good is because sizing vSAN manually is painful in my experience. There's lots of things which are quite variable, like for example in vSAN you've got this concept of slack space, which in update 1 for 7 they've renamed to reserve capacity, which is the amount of capacity you need in the entire pool in the cluster to do like transient data moves like rebuilds, and it's a bit like the old days where you need 10% to do a defrag, a bit like that, but it's a bit higher. So the percentage could vary from 25% down to 12% depending on the size of your cluster. So it makes it really hard to manually, you have to think about a lot to get it to go. Another thing is the failure to tolerate. So I don't know whether you know, within vSAN, each object like a virtual disk file will have an FTT value, and it's the amount of failures that particular object can handle before you lose your data. So if you had FTT1, you'd have 2 copies of your data plus a witness, and you could lose 1 copy and you still got your data, essentially, which is fine when you're doing a calculation because you just times it by 2, right? And the metadata for the witness isn't really an important consideration. But to make it complex, each VMDK can also have a separate independent FTT value. So as you can imagine, like how the hell do you calculate all that? It gets really complicated if you want to really thoroughly plan this. So yeah, essentially by taking the live optics data and punching it straight into the vSAN Ready Size tool, you're eliminating all that human error and you're making it a lot easier. It does it all for you. So what the Ready Node Sizer tool will then do is it will take all of those metrics and it will give you a grade of Ready Node. Ready Node nodes are kind of graded across all the vendors. And it will say you need this type of Ready Node, and it'll even let you pick your vendor and pick your particular, you basically select it and you can export it and get a quote based on that. It's incredibly slick, and hats off to the guys at VMware for making that a lot easier than it used to be. So that's I said quite a lot there, but that's how you size vSAN. Obviously, come to us and we'll help you do that. If you want to get a sense of this, reach out to Tom and we can crunch the tool through your environment if you want to. Okay, so next slide. Deconstructing vSAN. Yeah, so this is another webinar, another video which Jordan can send out. So it's more of a deep dive of the internal workings of vSAN, in particular for version 7 update 1. So there's kind of 4 main areas. There's a lot more in there, but there's 4 main areas I'll go into right now. One Paul touched on, which is the HCI mesh thing, which is pretty radical for vSAN. So you're basically able to, as he said, you can borrow storage from another vSAN cluster. So you kind of disaggregate your storage resources, allowing you to kind of independently scale and use your vSAN cluster storage. It's never been seen before. It's very, very unique. Well, obviously it's unique, they've just created it, but it's a very cool thing. But the one thing that's, from a technical point of view, the one thing that's worth knowing, this isn't like you just taking a bit of storage and mapping it via NFS or iSCSI or whatever. It's actually using the native vSAN protocol. So the way that objects replicate and all that kind of stuff, that's all it's all built in. So it's not just a remote mount. It's native within the vSAN protocol stack. But what that means to you on the front line, like with your, when you're actually administering it, is you can literally just select a remote vSAN location when you create a virtual machine. Essentially, that's what it means. So you could have your compute, the actual virtual machine, like memory and all that, will be running, and the CPU will be running on one cluster, but the storage will be connected to another. One other thing it allows you to do is move, doing a storage view motion, you can move the data for the VM directly across the vSAN network rather than going over the management VMK doing a shared nothing for emotions. It allows you to do much more optimized, much faster, much better storage of emotions, which is really cool, and that's not been there before. So the second thing is you can now separate out compression and dedupe. So before you had compression and dedupe and that was it. Now you've got, with update 1, 7 update 1 only, you can independently, so you can say, I just want to have compression but not dedupe, essentially. The reason why you want to do this is, I don't know whether any of you know, but within the world of dedupe on vSAN, you've got this concept of disk groups. So within a single host, you might have like 7 disks. You got like let's say you've got 7 flash disks. When you turn dedupe on, the dedupe table, which is the construct or the metadata for the dedupe, is actually striped across all the disks. So if you lost one disk in that disk pool, that entire disk pool goes down because it can't read the dedupe data. It's invalid. You'll obviously have other copies of the objects like the VMDKs and stuff somewhere else in the cluster, but it takes that one disk group down. So the idea, the concept that they've come up with this new release is, well, maybe you're not bothered about dedupe. Maybe you just want compression. Maybe you're running a workload that only needs, maybe you haven't got a lot of duplicate data that you can dedupe, and you don't care about it, so you just want compression. What it'll allow you to do is enable compression, get all the benefit of compression, but you don't get the downside of losing the entire disk group if a single disk dies, because there isn't a dedupe table to be corrupted or lost. So that's a really, I think that's a major step forward. One other quick thing is that they've gone from just having standard encryption at rest on disk up to transport encryption. So basically encryption on the wire, which is really awesome, because if you've got, let's say you've got like a stretched cluster across 2 sites, which you need decent network for. But anyway, if you've got a stretched cluster across 2 sites, or if you've simply got different hosts in different racks in different rows or different rooms in a shared data center, you can encrypt all the traffic that goes across the wire. That was never possible before. So any sensitive data, the payload could have potentially been tapped and read and deconstructed, and your data would have been compromised. So that's been fixed by including encryption on the wire, or transport encryption as they're calling it. And then the last thing, hopefully I'm not rattling on for too long, but the last thing, when you do maintenance in vSAN, so if you've got a planned maintenance event, I'm just going to turn my light on, it might be too dark. Sorry. If you're doing a planned maintenance event, when you put a host into maintenance mode, you get an option of whether you want to evac the data from that node and punt it somewhere else in the cluster. You do that because you've got this kind of 60-minute window before vSAN says, oh crap, that bit of data is gone, I'm going to reconstruct it somewhere else off the surviving data. So if you're going to do maintenance that's longer than 60 minutes, generally you'd put the host in maintenance mode and you'd potentially do an evac of the data. Normally you would. That's really intensive in terms of there's a lot of data moving around the vSAN network and getting in the way of your normal day-to-day operations. So what they've done is introduce only in 7 update 1, they've introduced a new feature that when you put the host in the maintenance mode, all of the writes that were coming in get redirected to another host that's hosting the replica of the objects. And then when you bring that host back out of maintenance mode, when you finish doing what you're doing, the writes are then copied like super fast back to the node that you just brought back online. So it reduces the need to do a full evacuation and provides additional levels of protection that were just not available in previous versions. Those are pretty cool features. And that's me for deconstructing vSAN. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, AC. So do you have a couple of questions for you? So don't rush off. Some general questions. What are the top 3 things that customers need to consider before embarking on any POCs of this type of VMware technology?
Hang on, are those questions to me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies.
All right, okay. Hang on. What are the 3 things customers working on this type of VMware technology? I mean, we'd have to evaluate whether vSAN is the right fit for them for a start. I mean, we've done a lot of remote office vSANs deployments and that for our customers. But yeah, maybe vSAN isn't the right fit. So yeah, we get engaged with us and have a conversation about what you're trying to do, what your needs are, I'd say, and then we can work out whether it's the right thing to do for you, I'd say. I don't know, that's one. I don't know about two more. I haven't had time to prepare the answers to that one.
I think you're right, though. I think everybody's different. You know, every customer has their own requirements. They've got things they need to do. So definitely, like you say, and this is what you guys are so good at, is just to get that conversation with you started, and you can then, you know, go through the evaluation processes that have been kind of previously discussed, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, AC, do you see capabilities like DR becoming more important?
Probably, I'd say. I mean, this is off the hat. I haven't thought about this, but I guess we've got a lot of like VM and resource sprawl at the moment. Things are so consumable and readily available these days. Like the amount of VMs I see on customers' environments is getting mad compared to what it used to be, you know, 5 years ago, whatever. So I'd say that environments are getting sort of inherently baked in, like baked into environments these days is inherent complexity. And you need to work out a way to make sure that's available should whatever your primary site is fail. So yeah, DR, maybe not DR itself, but automation of DR and streamlining DR is definitely important, because it's just really painful. I'm working with a customer at the moment doing a DR of about 600 and something VMs, and they don't have SRM, and we're doing it for scripts, and it's just not fun. It's just horrible. It's like, just buy SRM. So yeah, it's really important as your environment grows, you know, really think about, keep that DR documentation up to date, and really consider the consequences of you know, how large how complex your environment's getting. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'd say.
Perfect. Okay. And heading over to Jordan and Tom, are there any other questions that have appeared in the chat at all?
No questions in the chat, but if anyone gets any, then they can email them over to their account manager or me or Tom, and we can answer them after the webinar.
Fantastic. So I'm going to give you the answers to today's tea time themed visual quiz. But before we do that, we're just going to have one final poll. So pretty simple. How much better do you understand how VMware plus Simplify IT could help your business? Jordan's going to post the poll in the chat. So select the relevant radio button to how you want to answer this. So A is simply a lot, B is a little bit, and C, I finished all the beer in the first 10 minutes and you're going to have to remind me. So Jordan, once again, once the scores have come in, let us know what they are.
They're slowly totting up, a bit slower on this one. I think a few beers have gone down now.
That would make sense.
I might go start my beer. I forgot about it. It's in the fridge.
So it's nice beer, sir.
So the results are in. We've got 40% of people have said that they finished all the beer in the first 10 minutes, and we're going to have to remind them. But that's all good, because that means we can have more conversations with you. And then a split down the middle, 30% and 30% have learned a little bit, and 30% have learned a lot. And apologies for my spelling mistake there as well, a little but. We've also had a few questions in the chat as well during that poll, Rebecca. So the first one is this a move away from VMware on top of NetApp SAN setup?
I can take that. I guess the answer to that is it could be, but it definitely might not be. So I always recommend everyone looks at the environment and understands what technologies they're using and why they're using it, because there might be a really good reason why NetApp is the right solution, or it might be that NetApp isn't the right solution and vSAN might be the right solution. And you know, funny enough, I actually worked at NetApp for 15 years as well, so I've seen both sides of the fence. Technology is just technology. It doesn't really matter what the technology is. It's whether or not the features are right for you, and the cost savings or extra cost, depending on what's happening, is right. So it's definitely something that would need looking at, and that again is why we work with people like Simplify, who look at your environment and understand it better than VMware do.
Yeah, I'd add to that and say one of the things that is possible, you need to work with an MSP partner like ourselves, but one of the things that's possible is to connect external storage to the compute within VMware Cloud on AWS. So in theory, it's possible to do a snap mirror through NetApp to Cloud Volumes on Tap, and then connect that replicated snap mirror into VMware Cloud on AWS through the VPC. Technically, it's totally possible. The performance characteristics of Cloud Volumes on Tap are staggering, you know, because you just don't think it's going to be that good. It's really good because of what it's running on the back end. So there's a lot of options, but a conversation, it's not really like Paul says, it's not really a simple answer. It kind of depends, and we need to have a conversation. But yeah.
Funnily enough, actually, we can run ONTAP Select on top of vSAN as well. So we can actually do it the exact opposite way around, and vSAN using disks provided by, you know, HP, Dell, whoever, but then with ONTAP running on top of that. So again, there's lots of different ways there's lots of technology ways of doing things, but they're not necessarily relevant or appropriate for your use case.
Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic. Any other questions, Jordan?
Following on from that same thread, Tim's asked, isn't AWS just NetApp behind it?
No. No, it's running on elastic storage, isn't it? It's like
so I think initially when this was first being done, you know, probably 6-7 years ago, when I was still at NetApp, funny enough, there were some filers being put into co-locations, and the service was being offered that way. But yeah, things have moved on since that point, and again, now ONTAP is directly talking to native AWS storage, because that's the most efficient way of doing things.
Yeah, it's the same in Azure. They talk straight to object storage. Clearly, there are NetApp object storage solutions like StorageGrid, but yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Cool. I think that's it, Rebecca. If anyone has got any questions, again, though, just email us and we can answer them afterwards.
Perfect. Thanks, Jordan. So it just leaves me to say that, contrary to what this slide says, there are no prizes for this. It's simply just bragging rights. So here are the answers for the game show pictures that you've seen. So we had University Challenge, Shooting Stars, The Generation Game, Supermarket Sweep, Mastermind, Blockbusters, Robot Wars, and finally Mr. and Mrs. And then the bonus TV show with the hero floating around on a cloud was Monkey. So congratulations for those of you who got them right. We hope that it provided you with just a little bit of fun alongside the serious business of HCI. So on that note, I just want to ask one final question to Tom. How can organisations get engaged with Simplify?
Yeah, so it's following on from what AC said, really. So we call it a cloud readiness assessment. Cloud being the buzzword of the moment, but essentially what it is, we'll engage with you guys, doing an assessment of sort of what you need, what it is you're trying to achieve, and any pain points that you've got at the moment. Typically, and it would start with an as-is assessment, because we need to understand where you are before we can help you get to where you want to go. And we've got a number of tools that we can help to scope with this, such as live optics, as AC mentioned earlier. So really, what I'll do is I'll pop the contact information into the chat box. You can contact myself and AC, and you know, we can engage on some of these assessments as and when you guys need it, really.
Fantastic, Tom. Well, with that, it's time to let you all return to your families. So our thanks go to you, and I'm sure you'd like to show some appreciation for our presenters today. So give them a thumbs up or a wave in the reactions box. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's session, and don't forget that the Simplify IT team are available to take these conversations further with you. So thank you guys, all the experts today, for your input and your content, and thank you to our attendees for joining.
Thanks for hosting as well, Rebecca. You've been great.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Time to get the beer out. See you later.